that's the purpose of life, right? It's not happiness, it's aliveness. And so it brings you into this question of like, what am I willing to risk in order to be alive? And when you focus on that, you realize that you're probably willing to risk quite a bit. Hello and welcome back to Remember Why You're Here, a podcast for seekers and sensitives where you can relax, receive, reconnect to yourself, and remember the most important thing of all, why you're here. I'm Asia Suler, author, earth intuitive, teacher, and in this episode we're going to talk about something that's really close to my heart right now, which is how to take a sabbatical. So this is particularly close to my heart in this moment because I'm about to take my first ever sabbatical and I'm so excited. I am taking off the rest of the year from running courses, creating courses, answering emails, being on most social medias. I'm taking time off from all of those things to work on my next book. And I'm so excited about it. This book is like a little bit of a secret because I haven't really talked about it very much yet. But I had this realization at some point that if I was going to write this book, I would likely have to do something like this, take off concentrated time to actually get it done. I've had the idea of this book swirling around my brain now for 6 years. And in the interim, I've had a child. I'm still very much in the thick of parenting a young one. And it just got increasingly clear that if I was going to accomplish this book, or at the very least be able to start it in a real deep kind of way, that I would need to take special time in order to do this, time away, time to create. And so for the last 2 years, actually, I've been figuring out how I could take a sizable sabbatical to work on this. And over that time, I've really fallen in love with the concepts of sabbatical, doing all this research about how to take one, what you need to consider, what to expect once you're on a sabbatical. And so in this episode today, I want to share a little bit about my process, but also lay out a guide for you, a map. If you are someone who's feeling that call to take a sabbatical, then hopefully this map will really help you know how to take those first steps and know how to design something like this for yourself. Because here's the thing that really comes up for me with sabbaticals is that we need to reclaim this in our culture at large, that we so often glorify the hustle, especially where I live in the United States. The hustle is like one of our gods. And we glorify, right, this sort of like constant busyness, constant work, or its opposite, like the total vacation, or the time taken off where we're doing the opposite of work or just not having to think about anything, or the time that we create to deal with burnout. Sabbatical is not any one of those things. There's something inherently spiritual about taking a sabbatical. And it's also a shorthand that a lot of people tend to understand. It's one thing if you say to people, I'm taking a vacation or I'm burnt out and I'm doing this. But if you say I'm taking a sabbatical, there's this sense of deep respect around the choice to do something like this, to choose to step away and go deep. So let's talk a little bit about what a sabbatical actually is, because I think this will help frame, what it is that we're trying to do, what it is that I'm providing a roadmap for you for, and also why it makes sense that we have so much respect for this concept of a sabbatical in our culture. Growing up, I thought sabbaticals were only for people who were in academia. And this is, a big part of academia, especially if you are a professor, that it's sort of built in to your career that you're expected to take a sabbatical at least once, that you're expected to take time away to work on a research project or a book. But sabbaticals don't just have to happen within academia. It's not just for professors. Sabbaticals are for all of us. Sabbaticals are a sacred pause. So again, sabbaticals aren't vacations and they're not remedies for when you've pushed yourself too far. Sabbaticals are taking intentional time to create space. And this space could be space to focus on a book or another creative project. It could be to travel or go on pilgrimage. But there's this aspect of deep intentionality around a sabbatical, that you are purposefully stepping away from your normal work life, your normal routines, the way you go about things, to go deep inside yourself, to take a sabbatical from like the daily existence, to take a sabbatical and see a different side of reality. There's a deep spiritual seeking that's kind of inherent to this word sabbatical. And it's almost like making this commitment to your spiritual unfoldment. Like, I'm taking this break away from life in the trajectory that it was going in order for me to really like focus on and listen to that soul calling. And so whether that soul calling is taking you to travel or volunteer or complete some sort of project or start some sort of project, sabbatical is you listening to that whisper of your soul and really giving yourself permission to take time to follow that whisper, to follow that nudging, and allowing the daily structure of your life to change, to allow your trajectory to possibly change. Often sabbaticals are life-changing in this way. By their very nature, they help us rewire and rewrite the way we think about ourselves, our creations, productivity. We're going to get into that in just a moment. But I think in general, like sabbaticals, you can imagine them as like the fertile fallow period in a phase of gardening. It's like we are so productive all the time. We're always planting and pruning and harvesting. And a sabbatical is like specifically deciding to let a garden bed rest for a season while you go inwards, while you focus on something else, while you direct your attention to, the deep spiritual undertow within yourself. And whatever it is that is a part of that, whatever project or, gleaning or aspiration that you have that's within that. And we know in a garden that these fallow periods, these periods where you're just letting that bed rest, or you're only sowing one cover crop, you got your clover going or your oats going, you're just letting it be, that's really important for the garden's overall productivity. And this is true for ourselves as well. Our creative minds, our spirit's ability to feel fully inhabited in this life. Sabbaticals are incredibly helpful and regenerative for our soul and for our creative spirit. This is not just time off, it's time in. It's choosing to spend time inwards. And I really want to normalize the taking of a sabbatical in our culture. I want this to become something that is just, something we hear about more often, something that more people do, something that everyone's expected to do and supported to do at some point in their life. So your sabbatical could be a moon cycle. It could just be from full moon to full moon. It could be several months long. It could be a year long. All of these things are going to require a certain amount of planning and consideration. But I think when we reframe sometimes the deep work that we're doing and that we're taking intentional time and space around as a sabbatical, we help those around us to orient to what it is we're actually doing. And we flag what we're doing and the significance of it for our own spirit, for our own psyches and awareness, that yes, I'm not just frittering time away. I'm not just like taking a break, although breaks are great and we need them too. There's something about the word sabbatical that really signals to our inner spirit, this is a deep time. This is a time of soul commitments, and I'm interested in seeing where it goes. So how do you know that you need a sabbatical? As I'm talking, you're probably thinking to yourself, I need a sabbatical, because I think most of us do. But sabbaticals often come up when we are in a phase where we feel like we're sort of locked in to a way of thinking, or locked into a way of working, locked into a calendar or a schedule where we don't feel like we have the space to lean into the nudgings or the whispers of our soul. Oftentimes, the call to take a sabbatical begins with that whisper or that nudging inside of yourself, and that realization that in the way my life is currently functioning, I don't have the space for this, and yet I feel my soul calling me towards this. That is a clear sign that it's time for sabbatical. Sabbaticals can also be taken in life transitions. Maybe you're moving from one country to another, one house to another, ending one relationship and opening to another. These are really beautiful times to intentionally decide to take a sabbatical, to be in deep listening with yourself. Anytime we experience a feeling of like inner creative stagnation or clutter, it's often a sign that it's time to take this intentional season for ourselves, to clear the decks, to open ourselves up, to have the space to be able to listen to our soul and to the soul-led creative projects, awarenesses, and openings that are calling to us. Anytime we have this feeling or this sense of like, I need a time out of time, I need to touch another timeline, another way of being, that's often the call for a sabbatical as well. And there's this really interesting thing that happens within intentional periods like this, where we do create new timelines for ourselves. So timelines in our life are the result of the way that we are currently operating, our current level of consciousness, the way that our day-to-day flows, the structure of our lives. That creates the timeline of our lives. When we shift those things up, our routines, our habits, our patterns, we create the possibility for new timelines, to jump into a different timeline of what's possible for us. And so anytime the timeline that you're on starts to feel like a little sticky or suffocating or just not like a big enough container for what it is you feel you're meant to do or meant to explore in this lifetime, that's also a sign that it is time for a sabbatical. And I think it's really important, especially for empaths and sensitives, for us to reframe the guilt that we can feel around this. The guilt that says, who am I to be taking this time? Who am I to like have the privilege to take this? What are people going to think? People are going to feel like I'm not showing up for them. Are people going to be upset? And so, all of this guilt is actually a sign that there's like deep material here. And it's actually part of, I think, the purpose of a sabbatical like this is to come up against the hard stuff within us, the stuff that tells us like, I can't do this for whatever reason. And we're going to dive deeper into that soon. But I want you to reframe this as like, you're not abandoning your life, you're tending it. Like you're tending the deeper currents of your life, like who you truly are, why you're truly here. In fact, in our day-to-day lives, when we're just whatever it is, following the routine, following the schedule, doing all the things we think we should do, that's us abandoning our deeper lives. And we so often feel that, right? We can feel that sense of having abandoned ourselves, and it's so painful. And sabbaticals really help us reorient, to reclaim ourselves, to tend our lives in the way our soul is calling us to do. So how do you take a sabbatical? Let's get into the logistics on a physical level, but I also want to talk about the logistics on an emotional and spiritual level here as well. And I've been thinking about this a lot because I'm starting this week taking my sabbatical until the end of the year. And so I've been in deep preparation mode to make this possible. Sabbaticals start long before they begin. What do I mean by that? Well, most of us, unless we have a lot of ease and financial abundance in our life, we're going to have to really make sure we plan this out. I recommend taking at least a whole year to figure out how your finances work. So if you are in a job where you're getting a steady paycheck, you're going to have a pretty good idea of how much money you make during that time, how much vacation days you have, how much time you can take off without being penalized or being able to come back to your job. All those logistics are really important. If you work for yourself or you have your own business, you might even need like a couple years of legwork here to just really get the full picture of like, okay, how much money can I expect to make during this time if you have passive income, or how much money do I need to save in order to make this possible? And so that's why I say sabbaticals start long before they begin, because there's often a long preparation period to make sure that, of course, like you're going to be provided for, your family's going to be provided for, that you have the kind of security that you do need to make sure that, your basic needs in life are met and your family's basic needs are met. And so this planning phase, while it can feel like a little left-brained and logistical, at the same time, it's exciting because it really starts planting these seeds of possibility in your mind of like, what is possible for me? What can I do with, the resources I have, with the potential that is in my life? And often, actually, there's a lot more potential than we realize or than we currently see or are telling ourselves is possible. If you do work for someone else, if you do work for a company, find out what the policies are. Sometimes there's actual sabbatical policies and you don't realize it until you read the fine print. But, if you were to save up all your vacation and sick days as much as possible, right? Because we do also need sick days from time to time. But if you took advantage of all of those things, how much paid time could you get off? How much unpaid time can you take off and still make sure you have that job security? Obviously, these are all important questions to ask and research. And in my experience, if we're feeling this deep call to sabbatical, there's going to be some way in which we can make it possible, and that the time that we find will meet the time that our soul is needing at this moment in our life. Once you figure out logistics of what is possible for you, tell everyone you can. There's a few reasons for this. Obviously, we need to inform our employers, our employees, and people who do childcare for us, all the things, right? We need to make sure we inform people of this decision as far in advance, frankly, as possible, because it helps everyone orient to that. So, of course, there's a logistical reason behind telling everyone, but there's also a more emotional reason behind it, a psychological reason behind it, is that if you tell everyone you're going to do this, you're going to feel beholden to actually do it. And so I started telling people that I wanted to take a sabbatical last year. And in fact, I didn't say I want to take a sabbatical. I said I'm planning on taking a sabbatical. And it was like planting these inbred little like sign markers or like mileposts for me of accountability of like, I have told people I will be taking a sabbatical at this date. I know when I see them again, if I run into them in the grocery store or whatever, they're going to ask me about it. And so I've like planted for myself this like roadmap, this like insurance of like having that little bit of positive pressure, right, to make sure that I do it. So I encourage you, once you figure out the logistics and you come up with this plan, to start telling people about it, because it's going to hold you accountable, and it's also going to give your community an opportunity to show up and support for you, to show up and be cheerleaders for you as you step into this time. And it's been such an interesting thing that when I tell someone I'm taking a vacation or I'm taking a break, people are like, okay. But when I tell someone I'm taking a sabbatical, it's like I feel the whole field of their curiosity light up and they're like, tell me more. What are you working on? And so it's also this like intriguing bit of conversation too. When you tell someone that you're taking a sabbatical, people are really interested. They want to know more. It opens up possibility for communication and connection. And so it's become one of those things that I really love. And especially when you're maybe you're at a dinner party or a gathering and, you're in sort of that small talk area of like, well, what have you been up to? What have you been up to? And it's like both of you are maybe slightly understimulated, but you also know like, this is part of like connecting and developing relationship. And I find that bringing in the topic of I'm about to take a sabbatical, it like shakes everything up and people get really intrigued and really interested. And I also start to see a lot of the time people's own inner wheels start turning to think about, could I take a sabbatical? If I took a sabbatical, what would I want to do during it? What is the creative projects that's calling to me? So it's a really great conversation piece, as well as just this thing that will keep you accountable to this plan that you have for yourself. And of course, it's really important to set an intention and then set boundaries around your sabbatical. So the intention is, what do you want to do with your sabbatical time? What are you intending? Even if you don't have a very specific project you want to work on, there's still an inner project. There's a soul project. There's a psycho-emotional project that's important to you. Find a way to name that, to write it down, to have something that you're going to say when you tell people that you're taking a sabbatical and they inevitably ask, oh, what is it you're going to be doing? So make sure you're clear on that intention. That intention is really going to give you the focus that will move you through this time, that will help you get to the deeper and deeper levels that you're here to experience within your sabbatical. And part of creating this focus and this goal, this thing that's going to lead you forward, is also creating boundaries around this. When we have a goal, we're saying, this is what I'm focusing on, and I'm not focusing on all of this. And so I want you to be really clear when you're creating your sabbatical time of like, what is my goal? What is my focus? And setting boundaries around everything that is not that. And you might have to be realistic here. Maybe you're like, okay, I can't not check my email for 4 months, but I can only check my email once a week. That's a boundary. Write these boundaries down beforehand. Get super clear about them. Communicate about them with other people, because these boundaries are really going to help you stay on task with the deepening that is wanting to happen here through this experience. And perhaps the most important boundary of all is set a date and a time frame and stick to it. And, there's a piece here, right? Where like, no matter what we decide, there's going to be a part of us that is resistant. There's going to be a part of us that doubts that this is possible. There's always going to be more that you have to do. It's just the reality. But setting a date, setting a time frame, and sticking to it is so important, because you are signaling to your inner self, to your spiritual self and your soul, that this matters. That your own inner discovery, your own unfoldment in this life matters, that you're willing to listen to the dictates of your soul and take those steps. So, get this down in writing, tell the people in your life, set the boundaries about what you will be doing, what you will be available for, and what you will not, and step into it bravely. Now, in all of this, I want to mention that there's going to be parts of you that say, there's no way I can do this. And I think sometimes during certain times of life, that's true, right? Like, we do live in a physical reality with all of its limitations, with all of its socio-political complications. All of that is real. And oftentimes, if we are feeling that deep inner nudge to take a sabbatical, that voice that says there's no way I can do this is actually a message coming from our own programming that is up to be released. And you will come up against this every step you take in planning your sabbatical. You will come up against this, I'm sure, during your sabbatical. You'll come up against this as you review all the details you need to make it possible. And instead of having that thought make you panic or make you think, oh, I'm just like not emotionally up to this, I'm not evolved enough to do this, know that this is part of what a sabbatical is designed to do. It's designed to make you question the things you thought you needed, the security that you thought you needed, the permission you thought you needed, the money you thought you needed in your life. All of that is going to come up to be questioned during this. So when you have that question come up of like, there's no way I can do this, it is asking you to be with and sit with the part of yourself that is afraid, the part of yourself that is afraid of what you will lose and what that will mean. And I really encourage you, when this thought comes up, to sit with it and to see if there's any way in which you can actually work with that same statement to find truth. So what do I mean by this? I really love Byron Katie's process of the work, where she walks people through these statements that bring stress to our bodies and ourselves and our minds and our nervous systems, and turn them around to find how actually these statements that are causing stress are showing us where the truth lies. And it often lies on the opposite side of what it is that we're telling ourselves. So in the process of the work, when we have a stressful thought come up, like, there's no way I can possibly do this, and it's causing us anxiety, first we ask ourselves, is this true? And sometimes we might say, yes, it is true for all these reasons. But then you follow up with, can I absolutely know this is true? Like, beyond a shadow of a doubt, objectively, for sure this is true. Most of the time, the answer to that's going to be no. I actually don't know for sure that that's true. I haven't even done it yet. I haven't even taken this sabbatical yet. There's magic and mystery to life that I can't conceive of. Then we ask ourselves, who would we be without that thought? And often the person that we would be without that thought is someone who is free, who is connected to themselves, who has the resources and the things they need to follow the guide map of their soul, someone who does have the capacity to take a sabbatical. And then you look for the turnaround. And so the turnaround is like a 180 switch of that sentence or whatever the phrase is or the feeling or the thought that's coming up for you. And so a turnaround might be something like, there's no way I can possibly do this because I'm going to become destitute and I'll let down, my family and my friends and my employers, right? A turnaround for that might be, if I don't do this, I'm going to let down my family, my friends, my employers, and my soul, because this is what I'm supposed to do in this lifetime. And in this lifetime, following what you're supposed to do is what brings the light that you're meant to carry into this world into being. Or, there's no way I can do this. Original statement, turnaround. There's no way I can't do this. There's no way I can continue to live in my life and not do this for myself. So you're going to find the turnarounds that work for you with whatever the stressful thought is. But I really encourage you to just be curious when you have those thoughts of like, there's no way this can happen because come up, play with it a little bit. Is this true? Do I know for sure that this is true? Who would I be without that thought? And what might a flipped version of that statement be that actually makes me feel expanded and free and like something is possible? That's pointing you towards truth. And this will really help you to start to notice and dissolve some of these programs that you have within yourself. There's also a very real element when you're preparing to do something like this, where you have to ask yourself, what am I willing to risk? Because there is a risk. Of course, there's a risk in doing something like this, in, dashing the programs and changing the routines and stepping away and being that fool on the edge of the cliff, like in the tarot card, about to jump off. You don't know what's on the other side. But asking yourself this question, what am I willing to risk, can really bring you into the aliveness that's available for you here. That's the purpose of life, right? It's not happiness, it's aliveness. And so it brings you into this question of like, what am I willing to risk in order to be alive? And when you focus on that, you realize that you're probably willing to risk quite a bit. So for me, in my experience, I had already been planning this sabbatical this year when Hurricane Helene hit our mountains last fall. And when this major catastrophic event happened, I lost my whole apothecary, which was a significant portion of my income and my business's income. And not only did I lose this significant portion of my business's income, but I also lost months of work because I was focused on, mutual aid, raising money for our communities, the rebuild, as well as recovering myself. And so when this happened, from the outside looking in, right, it would have been really easy to think, there's no way I can do a sabbatical, this sabbatical next year. How am I going to take half of next year off after I lost a whole quarter of work and a significant portion of our business's income? That would take a long time to build back, if ever. And yet there was something else that happened for me in that moment where I touched the preciousness of life. I touched the very real reality and significance of the fact that life is short. Nothing is guaranteed. And I asked myself, if I were to die tomorrow, what would I have wanted to do with my life? If another event like this swept through and I, wasn't so lucky to have only lost this, what will I have been so glad that I took the time to do? What am I here for if not saying yes to what my soul is asking of me? And I realized after this experience that I'm willing to take that risk. And it's powerful to ask yourself, what is it that you're truly worried about that you're going to risk? Of course, for me, there was multiple levels, right? Like, as someone who's the breadwinner of my family, I'm worried I'm not going to be able to support my family, support myself, pay my mortgage, pay my health care. All of those things are really real, but also really afraid of letting other people down. Deep concerns around making sure I can still pay my employees, like my amazing team. I want them to be supported. I don't want them to lose their income. This was essential to me. And this was something too, these layers of things were something that really, at previous times in my life, really held me back from making riskier decisions because I wanted to make sure that there was enough safety and security and assurance for everyone, for all these things. And yet there was something about this threshold moment of experiencing such a catastrophe, of experiencing something where I was brought very close to that veil and really asked, what do you want to do? As Mary Oliver says, what do you want to do with your one wild and precious life? And the answer was so clear. It was this next book. This is what I'm supposed to do. Take this time. This is what I'm supposed to do. And I'm willing to take the risks of what happens when I do that. And that is such a powerful place to be in. If you're willing to look at the things you're afraid of, to name the things that is, your worst fear of what you'd be risking, and decide that the aliveness of your own soul is more important than the things that you fear, that is power. To be willing to take the risk. And so often the stories we tell ourselves about worst case scenario are just so far from the reality of actually what's going to happen, right? But it's important that we work with these parts of ourselves that have fear, that we don't just shunt them away, that we are with them, that we be with them. Because this is the work. This is part of the work of the sabbatical. It's not something that's getting in the way. It is embedded in the spiritual journey of taking a sabbatical itself. So all of this is going to come up as you approach your sabbatical, as you get ready to take your sabbatical. And so as someone now who has, moved through a lot of this and I'm beginning the sabbatical now, I'm going to tell you, it's actually really important that as you approach the date, your start date, that you're aware of the things that come up, that you continue to work with them, and that you create an exit plan and stick to it. Because as I said before, there's always going to be more that comes up. There's always more that needs to be done. But really ask yourself, get clear with yourself, what are the steps I need to take in that last, whatever the time frame is, 6 months, 3 months, 1 month, several weeks. What do I need to do to feel like I can step cleanly into this sabbatical time? And I encourage you to, as you create this exit plan, write it down, know what you're doing each week, have the tasks list that you have to accomplish in order to really be complete and step into this new phase, this new chapter, this new season. I encourage you to include some sort of ritual of completion and opening. Something that you can do to mark the end of that era and that timeline and the beginning of this timeline of your sabbatical, this sabbatical that is really a time out of time. Rituals really help our psyches and our spirits to orient to transition and change, to bring themselves fully into the new chapter. So design some sort of ritual for yourself that is marking the beginning of your sabbatical, the end of what came before it, and the beginning of this sacred time. And then you've begun. And then you are in your sabbatical. And as someone who's just at the start of her sabbatical now, there's a lot I'm going to be learning during this time. And I hope to be able to pop back in and share more about what I am learning as I go. But here are some of the things that I'm anticipating. When we start a new chapter, often things feel a little disorienting at the beginning, especially if we have high expectations of ourselves around, whatever it is we want to accomplish or do. But expect to be disoriented for a little bit. Expect when you step out of your routines, your habits, your programs to be like, okay, who am I? And what am I doing again? What am I doing here? Expect to have that voice of the inner critic come up who says, you did all this work to take this sabbatical and look at you. You can't even open that Word document or whatever it is. Expect that to come up. It's a bit like jet lag. Don't think that you're going to get to this new place and immediately be able to just jump into adventuring or sightseeing or whatever it is. You need a little bit of orientation time. Your spirit needs a little bit of orientation time. So as much as you can, be gentle with yourself in the beginning, give yourself less to do, lower your expectations, and just get used to your new reality first before you try to really start crossing things off of your spiritual to-do list. Because this is really an invitation to dive deep, to touch the undercurrents of your life, to rediscover what inspires you, to find new ways of working and being, to let your routines and your programs transform, and to allow all of the emotions that you have around things like creativity, productivity, the roles you play in your life, to allow that to come up, because it's gonna come up. But that's by design. That's so much of what you're doing inside of this sabbatical is actually like redefining your relationship to yourself, to the things that matter to you, to other people, to your creative outpourings in life. It will redefine your relationship to productivity and also your relationship to what you feel is possible. So, allow emotions to come up. If the guilt is there, notice the guilt. Ask yourself, what is it that you think I should be doing in life? Look for those turnarounds. Just be with what is, because this is so much of the work that we are doing inside of our sabbaticals. The whole goal here is to follow your soul, not strategy. So you might have a schedule for yourself, an idea of what you want to be doing. You might have put certain things on the calendar, but be open to mystery. This is you discovering how to more closely follow the GPS of your own soul. And so be open to course redirections, be open to listening, be open to things going differently than you planned. And that's all part of the wider plan. But there is something that I definitely want to orient you to and just have you be aware of, because it always happens. And this is something I am preparing myself for. And I'm reminding myself, Asia, you're going to experience this, so don't be surprised. And this is the mid-trip slump, or in this case, the mid-sabbatical slump. So I'm very familiar with this with creative projects, with travel. Whenever you're in the middle of something, there's going to be a slump. And it's a bit like when you're starting out something big and you're like at the beginning of a hike and you look out, over the trailhead and the vista and you're like, I'm so ready. And then you start walking and you get down into this valley and you're like, I can't see anything. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know who I am. Is this even worthwhile? I'm so tired. I don't want to do anything else. That's the mid-project slump, the mid-sabbatical or trip slump. And when you reach it, it's a good sign, because it means you've gotten to the heart of your experience. It means you're right in the center point of this experience. And you will climb back out. If you just keep hiking, keep walking, you'll come back up the other side, up onto the vista, the end point, the view, and go, yeah, that wasn't so bad. Now I look back on that valley and I see why I had to be there, why that was important for the journey. It was all built into arriving to this place. But I just want you to be prepared for this happening, because it's super, super common. And I really think it's actually an important part where we go deep enough. Our spirit trusts us to go deep enough to do some of this deeper psycho-emotional work inside of ourselves to release even more of these programs of limitations that we've been holding on to. This could also look like boredom, confusion, FOMO, doubt. All of that is part of this mid-trip slump. And the only thing you really have to do when this comes up is be with it. If possible, name the feeling that you're experiencing. Turn your attention inwards. Notice sensations in your body. Where do you feel it? What does it feel like? Try to use descriptive words. Breathe into the sensation. Allow it to be. The resistance is part of sort of what got us in the slump in the first place. So stop resisting it. Just be in the slump. Breathe it, feel it, name it in your body. Like, this is a time to companion our bodies and our nervous systems, because what's happening is our nervous system is trying to rewire itself, rewrite a new pattern and way of being. And as it does that, what it needs is just presence from us. Presence, gentleness, acceptance, the ability to breathe through what is happening, to be with the sensations in our body, and it will shift. There's that discomfort time when we're rewiring these patterns where, yeah, it's uncomfortable, but it is going to shift. And this is a big part of what you are doing and the kind of freedom you're creating for yourself through this experience. It can also be really helpful to dialogue with yourself during this time, to ask yourself, the part of you that is having whatever these feelings are come up, and say, what are you afraid of? What are you worried is going to happen? What is the worst fear? And how can I show up for you? What can I do to help you just survive this day or this moment? And companioning yourself this way will go so far in really giving yourself the kind of support you need to just keep walking. And that's what you're doing. You're just going to keep walking. And all of sabbatical is a ceremony. And with ceremonies, right, all the things come up. Like in a really good soul-shaking ceremony, it's not just daisies the whole time. Like in a really powerful ceremony, you're going to have elements come up that you need to work through. You're going to have the big feelings. You're going to have the doubt. That's all a part of the ceremony. And so just reframe this whole experience of the sabbatical that you're taking as a kind of ceremony, an extended ceremony that you're in. And the fact that stuff is coming up is a really good sign. And this is the other thing about ceremony. In true, deep ceremony, we do not leave as the same person we came into the ceremony as. Ceremonies change you. That's what they're designed to do. And so know that like you will be transformed by this experience. It might be gentle, it might be overt, it might be fantastical, it might be subtle. But you will be changed by this experience. So allow the change to happen and occur while you're within it. During sabbaticals, when we give ourselves this sacred pause and this sacred space, no matter what it is we're doing, we touch back into our life purpose. Because so much of our life purpose as human beings is just to be, to experience ourselves, to know that our creative visions, our output, our energy itself is what is needed in this world, is what we're being asked to bring. And so you'll be reorienting yourself to your life purpose within this sabbatical. And it's very rare that I hear anyone take a sabbatical and say, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. Pretty much most people who take sabbaticals come back and say, I'm so glad I did that. And it changed my life. It changed my relationship to myself, to my work, to my soul. And the thing about sabbaticals, just like ceremonies, is that they then give us the strength to step back into our life again, to rewrite the way we were living, to jump timelines by deciding on new programs, new habits, new values for ourselves. And this is the power of a sabbatical. A sabbatical can do all of this for us. So I'm hoping that through this episode, you got some framework for how to take a sabbatical, whether it's time for you to take one, what might be coming up during your sabbatical, and perhaps some inspiration to really start working on this for yourself, to start imagining, what you need and to be in touch with your soul and know that the risks that are inherent to saying yes to your own soul's unfoldment are always worth it. So wish me luck on my sabbatical. We have designed it so that there will still be podcast episodes releasing each week. And I'm hoping to pop in for a couple episodes where I give you an update about where I'm at on my sabbatical. So I'm super excited about that. You'll hopefully be getting a little more details about what this book is that I'm working on and what I've been doing behind the scenes. So stay tuned for that coming up, and know that this podcast is a huge reason why this sabbatical is still happening. Why, even with the huge loss and reorientation that happened last year for me inside of my business, that it's still happening this year, that it's still possible for me. Your support, you listening, you connecting in this way has really given me the strength and the wings that I needed to feel like I could really fly into this time. So thank you so much for that. And one thing that you could do to support me on this sabbatical, if you're interested in doing that, is to leave a rating or review for this podcast. It very literally means that all these platforms show this podcast to more people when it has more ratings and more reviews. So if you want to send me a little bit of magic as I begin the sabbatical, leave a rating and review, and I promise it will be like sprinkling fairy dust onto these wings that are currently unfolding. I'm so, so grateful for you. I'm so grateful for all the connections that have come about through this podcast. I'm so excited for what's to come. And I would love to hear, if you end up taking a sabbatical, what happens for you? Let's compare notes. I'm super curious, and I can't wait to let you know what it was like when I get to the other side. So thank you so much for being here. Know that the callings that you're feeling inside of yourself, the nudgings that you're sensing from your soul, that they matter, they're important. that the space will be made for you to step into those callings, that's why they're there, that you would not have those urgings, those callings, if there wasn't going to be space for you to be met in those. So know that whatever is moving you, inspiring you at the end of this episode and in your life right now, that it's there for a reason, it's there for a purpose, that you have a really special, powerful gift that you're here to bring to this world. And thinking about taking a sabbatical or simply thinking about what it is that you're called to will bring you back, in ways that are so nourishing and so fulfilling to that thing that is the most important thing of all, remembering why you're here.